I'm quite sure that you don't need me to tell you what the shape of the Gardner Douglas 427 harks back to. And we wanted to find out if the old hairy Chester is really just a testosterone machine for charging around town, posing and perhaps wrestling through the occasional gentle curve, or can it be used as a GT in the traditional sense, a proper Grand Tourer? So we've put it to the ultimate test. We've brought it to North Wales, where the roads are fantastic, but the weather is, well, terrible. To find out if you can live with this thing for a weekend away. Is it a viable alternative to the likes of TVR? You'll have noticed immediately, of course, the hardtop. It's a prototype that Gardner Douglas have been working on for the car, and it makes the whole thing an awful lot easier if you're nipping away for a weekend like I am. I can certainly vouch for its weatherproofness so far, because it got me here in this weather without getting wet. There is some noise, but they say that'll be engineered out in no time. But talking about noise, with a car like this, there's one noise that really matters, and it's this one. It's quite a nice noise, and it begs you to, well, give it a blast. I won't deny, I approached driving this car with, well, a bit of thrill and a bit of trepidation. I felt like a small boy hopping over a fence into a field to chase a bull with a stick with a pin in the end. Well, look at it on paper. It could be a real monster. We've got, what, 300 brake horsepower from a 5-litre V8 and a car weighing about 1,000 kilos. It could be a real frightener. So I was braced and ready to find something, the tail of which was far too keen to overtake the front. It's a pussycat, believe me. They claim at Gardner Douglas to have got the weight distributed roughly 50-50. They say that's because in a light chassis with a nice meaty jag diff at the back end, it kind of balances out the engine. I don't know, but it feels like it on the road. There's none of the tail sliding monstrosity unless you get a bit silly, and there's an awful lot of power under your right foot. This is a customer's car that we've very kindly been lent. So the setup is custom to what they want. Therefore, there's quite a long clutch travel on it, which is noticeable, but the payoff for that is it's not the meaty nightmare that you'd expect. You don't feel like you're lifting ton weights with your left foot. It's fairly cramped in the footwell, but that's purely because of the enormous transmission tunnel. The bell housing at the back of this engine must be monstrous. Have a big engine like this, you can't get around the fact that it is physically big, but that's one of the things that defines this car, one of its characteristics. It's a big V8. The interior has been beautifully trimmed, which gives it the feel of being every inch the hand-built sports car. Dials are well laid out in this lovely flat dashboard. It does feel very much the 60s period. And it's all very nicely fitted. Switches here for windscreen wipers, for the heater for the window. We've got fog lights, hazard lights, headlights. Here is the switch for the indicators, which is actually quite handy once you've got used to using it. And a dip switch for the main beam. It's all been quite cleverly done, but still remains feeling quite authentic in here. And of course the best control of all is turn the ignition on under here. You can probably hear the petrol pump ticking away at the back, and then that's my favourite one. The Cobra name is a legend in the motoring world, yet did you know that the replica snakes now far outnumber the originals? To be honest, there are so many now that the whole Cobra thing is in danger of getting, well, boring. The original Cobra was an unsophisticated brute with a ladder frame chassis which couldn't really cope with Ford V8 power, a monster in every sense, not easy to drive and frightful handling. For a start, Gardner Douglas dispenses with the traditional ladder frame in favour of a backbone chassis and semi-monocoque tub. To prove this design, the Gardner Douglas 427 went racing with Andy Burrows.
A definite sort of objective there was to sort of satisfy myself that the actual chassis and the suspension was up to the job of very high power, run over 500 horsepower in the race car, and I was obviously on sort of semi-slick tyres. So we put in a lot of stress through the car there, and we wanted to sort of give it a thorough shakedown. We've done sort of the 427 now in road going form, you know, as I say, for 9 years, so sort of prior to racing, 7 years of that has all been road going stuff. So to go to the next extent with the racing was really just to sort of test it to destruction, if you like. And having been satisfied with that, you know, we can now sort of, and having learned a lot more what's involved when you're setting the cars up for racing, I can now sort of confidently sort of use those ideas in practice on the new car, the GT.
In many ways, it's the engine that defines a car like this. It gives us its characteristic brute force and makes those gorgeous noises. Where the old Cobra, the original, went wrong was in having a chassis that simply couldn't handle all that power. The Gardner Douglas has a chassis that certainly can. So, as a sports car, success. But that's not the point of our test. We wanted to find out, does it work as a Grand Tourer? Well, the hard tops kept the rain off and the wind out. And the final part of the test is this. Can it cope with all your luggage from a weekend away? And I'd say the answer to that is self-evidently a resounding yes, absolutely. And with room to spare. So, Grand Tourer and a viable alternative for the likes of TVR? Yeah, it is.